interested. All right. So our next task in our platform game is have the character able to pick up items or touch other items like a hole and have something happen. Either they get points, they could get some points, they could get an extra power, okay? They could die. You can do whatever you want to do. All right? But I'll show you how the array will be created and how we can check for different types of items. All right? And again, since I'm recording, this platform game will not be completed, I don't think, Maybe it never will be. Just kidding. No, but, it'll be done well enough in here. And I think we've learned a lot of programming in here, so. All right. So step one was I went online and I looked for a treasure box. Remember that you could just use a rectangle at first too. Okay. And I saved this one. It was already a ping for me with invisible background, which was nice. Okay. So I saved it, and then I already clicked on it and drug it into my library and imported it in my library. Now, alternatively, you could just make a rectangle right now and then replace it. You know how that's pretty easy to do. So now, of course, we want to make this a movie clip. Remember that if we want to check to see if our character is touching something, if two movie clips are touching, they both have to be movie clips. Okay? So remember, any item that the character is going to touch has to be a movie clip. So we need to take this picture of the treasure, which is actually pretty large. Now, I really should edit this in a photo editor, but make it smaller. But we'll just make it smaller like that. Because remember that when you resize things in Flash, they are still the same size, kilobyte-wise. Okay? So they're still going to take up the same amount of space. We really should edit this in Fireworks or Photoshop, make it smaller. But I'll let you guys do that on your own. It's pretty simple. You just make it smaller and then drag it in. Okay? Because remember, it takes more computing power, and it takes more RAM, and it takes more hard drive space when you have larger pictures. Okay? All right. Well, anyways, okay, we have our treasure, and I'm going to F8 to make it into a movie clip. Like I said, we have to make it into a movie clip. And then, of course, we want to export for ActionScript. And then I can delete him from the stage. Now, if you wanted to, you could animate him on his own timeline. We all know how to do that. Okay, but I'll let you guys figure that part out. All right, so now we want to make an instance of him, and we want to make an array to put him in. To put all of our objects that we're going to touch inside one array. That way we only have to do one for loop for our hit test. We'll have one array keep track of all of the objects we can touch. Oh. Come here. Sometimes the camera decides to point to the wall. All right. So we want to make an array to hold all of our objects. So I'm going to copy this array because it's easier. And I'm going to call it my objects array, because I can hold good objects and bad objects, and then in my for loop, I can figure out which object they're touching and decide what to do. And it's good just to have one array keep track of everything, so we can have one for loop for our hit test. All right, so remember, this is our declaration. Our final's coming up, so remember that. definitely a test question. What is that? Declaration. Okay, that's our key programming terms, right? Declaring our instance variables. And then down here is our instantiation. So I'm going to copy this part so I can instantiate him. And I'll instantiate him, let's see here. Guess we can put him right after the platforms. So remember, you want to do all of your instantiations inside of your constructor. Kind of standard practice. And when we instantiate an array, we use the new operator. Okay, and voila, he's instantiated. Now let's make an object to put into our objects array. Okay. Now I'm going to declare and instantiate all of my objects here in my constructor and not as instance variables because I'm going to store them in the array and that's how I'm going to get access to them. So I don't need to make them all instance variables. Because in every level, so when you do level up, you could reuse these objects. All right. So I'm going to make a treasure object. So I'll say var treasure1. I can make more than one treasure object. Okay. He's going to be of type treasure. He's going to equal a new treasure object. So remember my treasure object's the thing I just made over here. So spell that, if you named it something else, you'll use your name right there. I always had a guide dog named Treasure, so whenever I write Treasure, I think of her. Actually, this puppy here is one of her babies. All right. Kind of a side note there. Now I want to, just like before, I want to set its X and Y and then add them to the stage and then push them into my array. So I'm going to do the same thing I did up here for my platform. So I'll take my treasure and set his X and Y. So this will be the X and Y on the stage. Now if you want it in relation to a platform, you can think how to, put it in relation to a platform. Alternatively, I can look on my stage. I could set up how I want it on my stage and then figure out my X, Y's and then delete them. Now some tutorials you might say, well, they put everything on the stage and then they make instance names, but to have less errors, we always add everything through our code. That's why we do it this way. Okay? So let's say I want it, I don't know, I'll have it down here. So then in my properties, I can see, hey, his X is 650 and his Y is about 400. I'll just round. Okay. So I'll put about 650. And then we'll want to add him to the stage. And then we'll want to push him into our array. All right. So now he's part of our array and we can keep track of him. And when you want to make more objects, and we'll add one more together, you'll do this the same way. Whether it be like a good object or a bad object. Okay, so we set his X and Y, we add him to the stage, and remember this puts him into our array. Remember to have that visual of your array, a bunch of boxes, we just put a treasure in there. Okay? All right. Now we're going to do something similar that we did down here. Remember this code? We can review this code. We had a for loop, And this for loop looped through all of the indexes inside of our platforms array. So remember, when you're iterating through an array or going through an array, it's called iterating through the array, you always start at index 0 and you always go to less than length. And that goes through every item in your array. And that goes for every programming language, okay? So this is a common for loop to know. So we're going to do the same thing, so I'm going to copy this. And Flash actually does do multi-threading, so he probably will do this loop at the same time as the other loop. Okay. And I can even write a note to myself, so I know what this for loop does, because if we leave this game and then come back to it, we'll forget things. So remember to write comments in your code. Check all of the objects on the stage to see if our player is touching any of them. And then perform the appropriate action. All right. Now I'm going to copy and paste this code too. I know it'll be different, but it's going to be similar. So I'm going to do something kind of the same. Oh, and I forgot to change this one. So this will be my objects array. So I want to change my for loop so that I'm going to go my objects array dot length, because this for loop will be for my objects array. So remember to change that. And so this is how we check to see what type of object it is. So if it's a treasure type object, we want to do something for treasure. Treasure is a good thing. Well, I'm going to make it a good thing. You could make it a bad thing in your game if you wanted. And I can make like his score go up, or give him another life, or give him points. You know, I can make a jingle noise happen. You guys know how to put sounds in there now. You would just make that sound effect happen. Okay, that would be cool to do. All right. So I want to keep this the same. If the player hits the test object, now I want to change my name of my array here to objects. And I did not make a hit area in my object. If you wanted to, you could put the hit area in there. But remember that hit area is because we made hit areas on the platforms. Okay. So I'm just going to check to see if he hit the object itself. All right. I can leave my trace statement in here if I wanted to. Trace statements are helpful. Remember, trace statements are just console output we use to debug our code. It doesn't enhance our game in any way, right? All right. What do I want to do? What do I want to do when he hits the treasure object? I can make the treasure object disappear and give him a point. Okay. So if I wanted to make the treasure object disappear and maybe a sound to happen, then I would just tell it stage.removeChild. Now, actually, I could remove him from the stage this way with the remove child, but remember that takes him out of the stages list. And then I can make a new instance, I guess, later on if I wanted to. Now, if you know you're going to reuse this treasure, you could just make him go off into outer space as well. So maybe I'll do both ways. So we can try it both ways. Oops. So if you wanted to remove him from the stage, you could use remove child. Alternatively, you could say objects I.xValue equals -900 or somewhere off in outer space. Now the reason I do this, remember, we kind of prefer this way is because we get null object reference errors a lot of times when we start removing and adding children because of the way Flash works. But we could try it that way. Now if I'd like a sound to happen, well, let's test this first, and then we could add a sound effect if we wanted to add a sound effect. Now something to check, just check your curly brackets, and you could even label your curly brackets. Remember, this is the end of the for loop, and this one's the end of my if statement. Okay, because remember that we have, actually I should put this curly bracket on the same line. Remember, I have a curly bracket here and a curly bracket here, and then these two are ending my. And I have this on the end on frame, or the method on frame enter. Okay, I can save him, and I can run him now. There's my treasure. Oh, I need these platforms out of the way. I can't even access my treasure. So I'm going to make my platforms a little bit higher. If you were like me, you put the platforms in the wrong place. Oh wait, I wanted that guy there, so that was my treasure. We'll make him higher. So I'm just going to get my platforms out of the way for a second. Because of the way I made my game, I couldn't access my treasure. I'm going to come down here. Aw. And we got a null object reference there. Dang it. These are the errors I was telling you about. So you could see that it did hit. So this is what I was telling you. Maybe it's better to remove him the other way. So I'm going to try removing him this way. And that's just the way that Flash, ActionScript gets compiled. Aw, I still got a null object reference error. Maybe we need to break. Oh, okay. Is that the problem? We could change it to J, I guess, actually. Maybe we should actually change the name of it. Because Flash actually does do multi-threading automatically. So I'm going to change that I to a J. And I think that I was getting mixed up with this I, probably, in its compilation. So let's change that. It's good when things go wrong, then we learn to program better. Okay, let's see if this works. Oh, it does move it a little tiny bit. Do you see how it does kind of change it? What are we doing wrong? Okay, good. That's important. It should, in essence, mine should be working. I don't know what I did here. I must have. Yeah. Oh, yes. Stupid error. It was showing the other one. Okay. That happens. Okay, cool. So he is going away. Yay. Okay, good. All right. So we did just make him disappear a little bit. If you wanted him to fade out, can you guys think how you would make him fade out instead of just bam, disappearing? One way that you can make him fade out, do you want me to show you how you can make him fade out? It's actually pretty easy. You would animate this treasure on his own internal timeline and tell it to play that first, and then tell him to go away. Okay? Alright. So if you wanted to make him fade out, you could take your object, and we want to animate him on his own internal timeline. Remember that you could do this for all of your objects. If you double click on him, you're on the internal timeline. And we're going to animate him like we've done before. Add 2 layers. One could be your A layer, and one could be your labels layer. On my A layer, on my first frame, I could put stop. Remember, we don't want to put a lot of timeline programming, but stop is okay. It doesn't seem to malfunction. Okay. And then, if I wanted to animate him, I will have to make him a movie clip inside of himself. Remember that inner movie clip symbol. Because right now, when I click on him, he's just a ping or a bitmap. So I would have to F8 him and call it inner treasure. And export for ActionScript. So now I can tween him and make him fade away. So I would right click on him, make sure you're in the right layer, and make sure you have him selected. You could create a motion tween. And on that last frame there, I could take his alpha transparency and make it 0. So what that does is it fades him out. Okay. And then I would want to add some ActionScript code here to actually make him go away, because just because he's faded out doesn't mean he's going to be gone from the stage. And so, you know, you'll still be able to hit him if he's still on the stage, even though he's invisible. So we really do want to get rid of him. So what we're going to do is on our ActionScript layer, we want a keyframe, because remember, you only can put ActionScript on a keyframe. So we'll hit the F6 key to put a keyframe on that last frame there. And in my actions, I will call a method called disappear, which I need to write. Kind of like how we did in that other game that we had. Now in my labels layer, I'm going to extend my labels layer by hitting the F5 key. And then on frame 2, I'm going to hit the F6 key to get a keyframe, because on the second frame, I want to name that frame. Remember, if we want to go to a frame, we're going to say go to and play fade out. I need a keyframe to label that frame. So on the second frame on the labels layer, I hit F6, made a keyframe. And I can call it fade out. And you'll see it labeled here on the timeline. So remember, he's going to go to frame 1. It's going to stop because we told it to stop. Then we can tell it to go to and play fade out. He'll play, 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 play. He'll get to this frame, and it's going to tell him to disappear. Now we need to write disappear so he knows how to disappear. Okay, to get him to disappear, let's write the disappear function. It's pretty easy. We want to write it inside of his class so that he knows how to disappear. We'll go to his properties. So I right-clicked on my treasure, and I'm going to his properties because I want to access his class file. And remember, to access any of the class files, the easiest way, I think, is to go to the properties and then hit that pencil icon. So I right-clicked, went to his properties, got this window, and then hit his pencil icon. So he's like that. Remember these class files. So remember to write your function outside of any other function, but before the end of your class and before the end of your package. So we'll call it disappear, spell it the same way. It can be of type void. And we can say this dot x equals stage dot stage x plus 500. And that'll make him go way over yonder. Remember to save it, so Control S and save it in the same file folder as the other files, which it should want to do by default. Okay. And now we have to just change our game to call this function. Well, to play our, actually not to call this function. This function's called on our timeline. We just have to play our treasure disappear, fade out. Okay. So in our code where we were before, instead of saying, hey, your x value equals negative 900, I'm going to tell the object to go to and play. The fade out. So that tells it to go to his timeline, go to the fade out label, play it, and then at the end of that one, we have our disappear function. And I think I might have messed up on this. So it didn't like my stage.stagex thing. So I just got rid of him. Really make sure he works. Oh, he's not working. He's sort of faded. Oh, there he goes. And then he is gone because I'm not touching him anymore. So I just changed that one thing where I said this.x, I just put negative 500 here in that class. Now you do have to go away from it. How could we fix that problem? Actually, I'll have to think how to fix that problem. So notice if you hit him once, he does fade out. And he is gone from the stage because it isn't letting me hit him again. The only problem is, you see our problem? He waits till we're not hitting him to finish. That's quirky Flash for us. How can we get him not to do that?
We can make a property inside each other that tells it when it's hit, and then we check that whenever we check the...
Actually, that's a good idea. Kind of like how we did in the other game. So you make a little switch. Remember that? You make a little switch, and then when you hit, you turn it on. And then when you're not touching them, you turn it off. That probably might be the best way to go about it. Good job, Peter. So if we wanted to make that, I could show you. So in our treasure class, we're going to make a little Boolean switch and turn it on and off. Because our objects need to remember that about themselves, so it should be part of this class. We can call it, what should we call them? We could call it invisible again, or we could call it touched. I guess we can call it invisible so we can kind of follow how we wrote our other code. Okay, and he'll be of type Boolean. It makes sense to be of type Boolean. Remember, Boolean has two values, either true or false. Okay. So just, like the methodology we did before, we declare our instance variables and then instantiate them in our constructor. And actually, you can instantiate a Boolean this way by just instantiating him to false. And that makes a new Boolean object for you and sets his value to false. So we'll need to have a mutator function. And actually, this is good programming. This is, most classes have these things. Remember, a mutator allows us to change our instance variable. And our mutators usually, start with the word set and then the name of the instance variable. And then they usually have a parameter of the same type that you're going to set it to. Okay. So this will allow us to change that invisible to whatever we send in here. So if we send it true, it'll set invisible to true. And if we send it false, it'll set invisible to false. Now, because we made him private, because we were good programmers, we also need an accessor function. Remember, an accessor function allows us to see our instance variable, or get the value of our instance variable. And so our accessor functions sometimes are called our get functions. And they usually start with the word get. Sometimes these are called getters and setters. You'll hear that a lot. That's what an accessor and a mutator is. Accessors don't take in a parameter, but they do return a value of the same type as our instance variable. And so we're just going to return that invisible.
Should it set invisible and return type be void?
Yeah, actually. I just thought of that. I'm like, Remember that ActionScript's very forgiving. If we forget to put a return type, it does make it void by default. So, okay. But we should be good programmers and put that in there. That means it returns nothing. Remember, void means nothing. Okay, so remember that's our mutator and that's our accessor. Those are good programming terms to know. And now we can use this invisible value in our code. This gives our treasure more intelligence. Our treasure can remember if he's invisible or not now. It gives him a memory. Remember, an instance variable inside of an object gives it some kind of memory. It remembers things. Okay? All right. So we can either have another if statement or just make an and statement. So I'm just going to put an and statement right here. And I'm going to say, if my treasure object dot get invisible and then I'm going to use the and operation so that both parts of my Boolean statement has to be true. This has to be true and this has to be true. Now if it's getting invisible, it'll give me true if he's invisible and false if he's not invisible. So I'm going to switch that and put a little not operator. So if he's not invisible, that's how that's read. If he's not invisible, so if my object treasure is not invisible, and my player is touching that object, then do these things. And so inside of this if statement, I want to set him invisible. So I'm going to set him to be invisible. I'm going to send it true. So that way, the first time around, he will be visible. So that'll come back as true. It'll say, yes, I'm touching it. Then it'll say, okay, I'm going to make you invisible. So then next time around, this will be false. And I won't be able to get into this if statement. Okay? And that should make it smarter. Yay, and then he fades out, and he fades out right away, and we're cool. That was actually a pretty smart way to go about it. And yes, it's a little bit more programming, but I think the fading out adds a lot of enhancement to our game. And it wasn't that bad. And it's good to see how to do that. Okay. And remember to change how fast that fades out. You could shorten your timeline. It could fade out faster. If you wanted to fade out, have a longer fade out time, you'd make your timeline longer. Okay. And remember, if you want to do points, you can give him points or lives. You guys know how to do that stuff. Cool. All right. Should we add another object, or are you guys like good on adding objects? Remember, if you want to add another object, it's really just copy and pasting. We can do one more if you want to. Want to do one more? Yes, no, maybe so? Okay, we'll do one more. I answered my own. Let's do a bad object, like a hole. What if we want our player to fall down a hole? So when he touches a hole, we'll make him fall through the hole and disappear. Okay, that would be kind of funny. All right. So if I want to make a hole in my game, I'm just going to use my oval tool and make a hole. Maybe I'll make my hole a little bit bigger. Okay. Now, of course, it needs to be a movie clip object, so I'm going to F8 it and call it my hole. Call him black hole or... Then I can delete him from the stage. Now, I'm not going to want to animate him to fade or anything, so... Okay. Actually, let me look at that guy for a second. All right. Because I'm thinking that I would like the player to fall through the hole when they reach the middle of the hole, so I'm going to remember this, okay? All right. Let's go into our code then. And we're going to add him the same way. So remember, when you're adding these things, you get to copy and paste a lot of stuff. Okay? So I'm going to copy and paste this part and then add it as a whole object instead of a treasure object. Okay, so I can call this my whole one. Since I named my object whole, I'm going to make him a type whole. And then I want to set his x and y value, add him to the stage, and then push him into my objects array. Now I don't want to add him in the same place as my treasure, or maybe I do. It'll be like a trick. But for now, let's add him somewhere else. And voila, if I run my code right now, I should see my whole appear. Of course, we haven't, done anything with him yet, but he should be there. Okay, so you just copied and pasted that code and pushed him into our objects array. And then you can guess what we're going to do down here. We can copy and paste this code. So I'm going to take this whole code from right there to right there. Now remember, I'm going to put this new code in my for loop because he's part of the objects array. So leave that ending curly bracket. You don't want to copy and paste that one. Just the two if statements. Oops, I did indent. So remember that this code was checking to see if it was a treasure. This code could check to see if it was a whole. Okay. Now I'm not going to have that invisible property. So I need to get rid of that part of my code, right? And I'm not going to check to see if he's invisible. And actually, I don't want to remove him from the stage. And I don't need to do this. Now, what do I want to happen? What I would like to happen is to have my character look like he fell down the hole. Okay, so let's just program it simply at first. Right? So what we'll do is we'll let's just do one. Let's just make sure it works at first, and then we'll change it. So what we could do is we could just remove the player from the screen at first, and then we'll add some animation. So let's just check to see if our player will disappear when he hits the hole. Okay, and then we'll think how to make this code better, which is a good way to program. You just program it simply at first, make sure it works, and then, change it up. So you can say, oh, there he goes, he disappears. Oh, he actually comes back. And why does he come back? Because he's still listening to the mouse move. So if I didn't want him to come back, what could I do? Yeah, remove the mouse move event listener. Okay. It's actually kind of funny he comes back, so I'll just leave it. All right. Now I would only like him to disappear if he's hitting the middle of the hole. So I can add some code here. I could say if players.xValue equals Now think about how we want to program this. So I'm going to have this hole, right? And then I'm going to have my player. So my player object's x value, remember the horizontal value, his x value, if it equals, now remember that the hole's x value is this top left-hand corner. So if my player's x value, which is his top left corner, equals hole's x value plus half the width of the hole, then I want him to disappear. Does that make sense? Because here's his x value. I'm going to add the width, half of the width of the hole, and then check this guy's x value to see if it's the same. And if it is, then I want him to disappear. So see how we're adding that logic into our game? All right, so if the player's x value equals the object's x value plus that object's width divided by 2, and I can wrap this thing in parentheses. Then do these two things. Or make my player disappear. Remember that this checks for equality. Now let's see if that works. Aw, it didn't work. Let me get the other ones off the stage here. So we can debug this by writing some things out. So I'm going to print out what this value is so that I can make sure that it's equaling what I think it's equaling. So this is a good way to debug your code. You just trace that statement to see what that value is. And then I'm going to also trace out what my player's value is. So when I come down here, okay, I can look in here and see what those values are. And they are rather large. So my player's x value is what I expected it to be. But this guy is printing out this gigantic number. So let's go back into our code and just print out his x value. I think we might have gone wrong right there. Okay, that looks about right. I think when we added the width, it messed things up. So what I'm going to do is take out this part and just put plus 50. I think that'll work good. Okay, cool. Except he's still not disappearing. Oh, there he goes. Here he comes back. Oh, he's not disappearing again. He disappeared once. Oh, there he goes.
He has to be the exact value.
Yeah, because that's equals. Maybe that's hard to achieve. What we could say is if you are greater than this, we can give it like a range. And then we can use the OR operator here. That's the OR operator. Or we'll say less than. This plus 100. Or maybe 75. Actually, this should be an AND operator. All right. There it goes. All right. So I'll leave this code up here. So I was just checking for a range of values instead of just a single value. It seems to work a little bit better. Now, if you'd rather him just not disappear, then you could add that animation to his internal timeline, like a disappear function to his internal timeline to make him fall down. But I think this is a good place for me to take a break. And whenever I don't pay attention to our camera, he points to the wall. So I'm going to pause. We'll come around and we'll see what you guys have. All right. So remember that in our code, when our player jumped, you know, we play around with this gravity variable, and then when our on-enter frame event, we're always adding gravity to the player. And then to make the player stop falling, we did it this way. We changed his Y value again. This probably isn't the best way to program it because here we're adding to the Y value and here we're making it stay. And so it's constantly, the Y value is in this constant flux. It probably wasn't the best way to program this. Okay? Because the Y value is always changing, and you know it might start to jitter sometimes, make our player jitter or look weird. And kind of a better way to program that would be just to turn gravity off when he hits the bottom or hits a platform. Just turn off gravity and then turn it on when he's jumping or in the air. So remember, if you want to turn a variable on or off, you just make a Boolean variable. So we can say apply gravity. And we can make it a Boolean. Okay. Then we can use this guy like a switch. We'll turn on gravity when he's jumping in the air, and then we'll turn off the gravity when he's on the ground or on a platform. And that way we're not just changing that Y value all the time, and which cause problems. This will be simpler and probably a better way to do this. It's good to see both ways and why the other way didn't work, right? All right. So in our constructor, we'll apply gravity and we'll set it equal to true at first, because at first we want him to fall down from the sky. His gravity can be true. We want to apply the gravity. Now on our on-enter frame, instead of just constantly applying gravity, we'll make this into a branching statement. We'll say, okay, if apply gravity is true, then go ahead and add to that player's gravity. That makes sense, right? And that way, if we turn this off, it'll stop manipulating the player's y value. So we'll turn it off when he hits the ground or is on a platform. So that way it'll stop changing that y value and we won't get that. I saw in Candace's game, it was like a jitter effect because we're constantly changing the y and, you know. All right. All right. So right here in our code, where is he? Right here. Stop the player when he reaches the bottom of the stage. This is how we were changing it before. That's how we stopped him from falling, which we figured out wasn't the best way. Okay. So all we have to do then is turn the gravity off. Instead of changing his y value, we'll just say, hey, stop applying gravity. That would be cool, right? Just turn off gravity. And so then, you know, you can do the same thing down here at the bottom. Well, not bottom. When he hits the platform, remember this is how we were changing our platform. Our player's y value when he hit the platform, we did the same thing. But you could just say apply gravity false. So everywhere that you change that player's y value on the platforms, just put apply gravity false. Now when do we want to apply the gravity? When do we want to make it true again? We have to make it true again so he won't just fly up in the air, right? When do we want to make it true again? When he jumps. Okay. So in our jump function, the beginning of our jump function, whenever he jumps, just make apply gravity back to true again. And voila, it makes our gravity turn on and off. So we're just turning on gravity when he's in the air and turning off gravity when he's not. And that seems to work pretty good. Oh, he's still touching a platform. Oh, he's not going down. So I just need to change the rest of my So I'm going to put apply gravity false. And then down here, we make apply gravity true. There he goes. He falls down the hole. All right. We'll pause again.